right, so today we're going to talk about Zentangles. They're one of my very favorite projects to see you complete, as well as my favorite projects to do on my own. So Zentangling is using these intricate small line patterns to create a beautiful work of art. This is the Zentangle website right here that we're on looking at currently. To scroll down really quick to show you just about the Zentangle method. It was born out of the idea that you absent-mindedly will draw on the edges of your paper, you will doodle, you will make these little designs already. This creator decided to turn those into a way for her to relax, to take her mind off of things, and then all of these other things have been born of that. It does expand your imagination because sometimes you might make a stray mark and you have to kind of figure out what to do with that mark. It definitely teaches you to trust your creativity and to trust your hand, that you're going to make a mistake, but you're going to have to just turn that mistake into something else. Very Bob Ross-like, to turn that little mistake into a happy treat. So if you're looking for more tangles, you can come to the Zentangle website. They have some examples, I believe, but my favorite thing to do to find examples is to just Google them. This is the website again. You can actually take classes, become a certified Zentangle teacher. I took one of these mini classes when I was in college. The person came into our art education class and gave us a really quick demo. But we're going to do something different. I want to show you some other patterns. So these patterns, there are thousands of them. You can just Google, click image, and you will find more than you will ever need. You can also, let me get back out. Scroll down and find the website. You come to tanglepatterns.com. Yes, look at this. You have all of these at the top. They're alphabetized because each person who creates it gets to name it. So if you come up with one that's totally new, you get to submit it. It'll get approved, and then you can name it whatever name you come up with. So that's kind of a cool concept. So the basic idea of these Zentangle is to create a space composition. Go in and divide that composition into different sections using lines. I typically use a Z shape when I do it with you guys in class, where we will draw a Z shape and create 4 sections. And then you fill each individual section with a different pattern. Now, from this, we're going to do a different project, and I'll show you guys that in just a second. But I want to go through and show you, when you click on these letters, you start getting a ton of different patterns. This is the cool thing about this website. Again, you can just Google it, go to images, you'll find the actual pattern. But when you do this, they show you the step-by-step of how they made that pattern. So you might look at this little pattern and be like, no, I can't do that. But you can, because down here it shows you start with a heart, you draw a little Z in the middle, you color it alternating back and forth like a checkerboard, left side, left side. Do the same thing for the whole section. Then at the end, they go back and add little flourishes in this negative space where there was white before, and boom, you have just made a beautiful pattern that you didn't think you could do a few minutes ago. So I just want to show you that site. It's so cool. There's thousands of these tutorials on there. I just think they're really neat. So this one's pretty ornate looking. Same thing. It's based off of this title. Has the how-to steps. So cool. All right, so the next part of the video will be me showing you how to actually start your Zentangle for this class. I'm going to ask you to do on your Zentangle is I want you to do a practice run. Have another sheet of paper. Let me put my good paper over here aside for a second. Have another sheet of paper that you're going to practice these patterns on. If you want to start off with a warm-up Zentangle, it's optional. You will not have to turn these in, but this is what we do in class typically. We make a mini one. So I start by making the 4 dots in the corners, going in, connecting the dots. Doesn't have to be a perfect line. I like to make them purposely a little wavy. And then, like I said on the previous video, I like to divide it up using a Z. So I'm going to make it touch the top, the side, the other side, and then come down. Okay, so now I have a Z shape. You could have easily went in Let me do a second one to give you the other options. I like to give you guys lots of options here because, I mean, it's art class. It's time to be creative. So you could have went in and done loops, done the same thing with a bunch of loops. When you do a loop, though, you're going to have a separate section to fill. And my thing is, if it's a section, it gets a new pattern. Okay, so if you really want to try a lot of patterns, go for it. Now, you can start in pencil. The Japanese have a idea where you have to start in ink. This is for their calligraphy. You have to start in ink, continue in ink, and your mistakes become part of the artwork. But I understand that this is art one, and I know that you guys really aren't going to want to show all your mistakes through your ink. So I'm fine if you start in pencil. I will tell you, if you do the entire Zentangle process, you're going to do kind of double work because you'll do it in pencil and then in ink. And then if you want it to be pencil, Sharpie, let me grab an ink pen. Got a couple ink pens. Didn't have them over here by me, sorry. Okay, a couple of different ink pens. Any kind of ink pen you want. There are some really, really nice Zentangle type ink pens out there for drawing. I stick to just the ballpoint pens. Okay, so now I'm going to look up on my screen, which I can't share this with you at the time, but let me find some Zentangle patterns that I know I want to do. Also, I have sheets of these for when we were back in class together. If you ever need to just look through some that are not part of, where's my book? If you ever need to look through some that are not part of the website, I have sheets of them that I've printed out. I have several of the Zentangle books. They're just like little workbooks and examples. So I'll look through some of these and fill in my space now. So you can guess how it was done, or you can go in and look up that website, and you'll probably find like this one's called Chemistry, like Chem Mystery together. So we're going to try that one. So I see that there's circles spaced pretty evenly. I'm going to try to make my circles even. They do not have to be perfect. Together, when we get the pattern done, it will look really nice, even if there's some mistakes. So I recommend not just throwing this away if you make a mistake part of the way through, but finishing it, seeing if maybe we can fix that mistake another way, or just let that mistake exist. Okay, so here we go. Now this is the part where like some patterns have like tons of coloring. So you guys have a nice thick Sharpie. I'm gonna leave a tiny little white dot. Hopefully it doesn't bleed together there. Since I'm using the felt tip, if you're feeling extravagant and want to grab a fine tip Sharpie, those are super handy for these. Don't have any though in your art kits. There were not enough when I purchased these. Okay, then to finish the pattern, it looks like they went in and put some little corners. So if you wanted to go back on the edges and do some kind of corners, you could. So I'm going to stop there with that one. Now this pattern has a lot of white, so I'm going to choose one off of the sheet that has a lot of black to go next to it. This is not a requirement. It's just sort of how I like this one. How I like to fill mine in, because it gives you variety when you're looking at it from very far. Being an art teacher, I'm always thinking about doing something that creates attention or causes people to stop and pause on my artwork a little longer, because that's kind of the end goal as an artist. You don't want somebody to just like flip right past something that you spent all this time on. You want them to linger, take their time, look at it, try to figure out what the artist was thinking. It's kind of the ultimate goal. So I'm going to fill in 2 of these spaces, and then I'm going to move on to the real one. You could fill in your other spaces. Again, using the thicker marker just makes life a little easier. Thankfully, it does bleed a little bit, so I don't have to be exact with my coloring here. Okay. Remember, the best thing about these videos is if you want to fast forward to the next part, you are more than welcome to do that. But being a tutorial, I'm going to keep it and go through the steps. so almost done coloring it in. Remember, the longer you take to do something, the nicer it will appear. For example's sake, a lot of times I go a little slower. I'm trying to show people who haven't done it before how to do it. Okay, so there is this pattern, or my version of it. Now, I can go in and fill in these other two later, so I'll do that. But that can be like a practice round. It's also nice to have scratch paper, just in case you're trying to figure out, like this one, you're trying to figure out what they did, and you just don't know, so you're trying to draw it over here before you put it on your actual paper. Because like maybe you're trying to figure it out, and you end up like making these overlapping lines, and that didn't work for your pattern. I think you're doing diamonds. Nope. Did I do that? Yeah, I did it right. So like you can work on eliminating these extra lines in yours. So let's see. I'm gonna show that little example. But then I think they went back in and colored these all in, divided these in half. And it looks like this is one of the ones. Sometimes they will use a pencil to shade. So like if they were trying to make it look like a cube, maybe they tried to shade, add that third dimension in there. Who knows? But you can go in and kind of practice and see how to make one on the scratch paper too. Try not to do those practice things on your final paper unless you just want it to be extremely experimental in your art making. All right, so I'm going to move on now, and we're going to lay out a larger design. So I'm going to post some examples along with this of things you can do, but I want you to be thinking about positive space and negative space. So I mentioned that word when I was going through one of these other videos. Positive space is where something is happening in an artwork. In these designs, the positive space is the black. The negative space is the white. In major artwork, like I have a painting here, I'm seeing if I can put it under the dot can I've been working on, a painting of my daughter. So the positive space is the person, the negative space is the background. So you're making an artwork that has positive and negative space. So the main object is going to be in silhouette negative space. And then the negative space in the background is where you're going to do all your Zentangles. So an example, let's say that you're going to draw your initials, or just one of your initials. Let's say I'm going to do the letter J. We talked about doing bubble letters so far in class, so hopefully you have an idea of how to do a basic letter. Or you're more than welcome to print one out or hold your paper up to your screen and trace a letter. Let me show you. The paper you guys all have should be easily, like you can see through it just enough that if you had printed out a letter, you're more than welcome to trace that to get your shape. But you're going to start with a shape. Now, maybe you're doing a letter. Maybe you decide that you want to draw a bird. So you're going to make your negative space a bird. So I'm going to do a little generic songbird here. Okay, so that could be my negative space. Then you're going to divide the area around it into at least 7 patterns. Okay, 7. Number 7. All right, 7 patterns. That's our goal. So I want you to think of how to divide it up. Do you want to come in from the edge and do a line? Do you want to make a loop? You might have to go into the shape a little bit to make your lines flow. If you want to do zigzags, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, possibly an 8 tiny one. And I could even come in by this bird's tail and just create a line, divide that one up into 9. Then I would have more than enough, and then I wouldn't have to do a pattern, one pattern for a really long time. I will tell you that your patterns need to be a little bit more complex than your line landscape patterns. Your landscape patterns were really simple lines. Like you could have just had thick lines, thin lines. Like this is not going to count as a pattern. That is not enough. We're doing Zentangles, not simple patterns. Those work great for your lawn landscape. That's a little shorter of a project. I'm giving you guys a little bit more time on this one, so I'm hoping they turn out awesome. But just a note that it needs to be a little bit more complex than the same patterns you were using before. Okay, so now you're going to start filling in your space. So I can divide up this one also. If you want to radiate out, some people really like this sunburst look. To me, it almost looks like the edges of a beach ball. And you look at the end of it, and it's all lines going out in different directions. So I think I have at least 7 there. Yeah, that's 7. This one looks funny. I'm going to change it to there. Remember, start in pencil and you can erase. Or if you're feeling extremely confident, you can go ahead and go for the other. Now, I know that my Sharpie is going to bleed through if I use Sharpie, so I'm going to remove papers I don't want damaged. If you're working on a surface in your house, and you don't want to bleed through and have anything on it, this is a work table for me, so it's okay if I bleed through a little bit. It's used for art purposes only. Then I'm going to start filling it in. Okay, same thing from the last one. I'm going to look for patterns that kind of alter. I really love this, the idea of a bird, so I'm going to try to do that one first. So for me, that looks like, I'm going to go for pencil. I'm going to err on the side of caution. Okay, so it looks like, gosh, a grid. This is probably where I should double check and do this on the practice paper. I think I can pretty much get it. So it looks like a grid. It has a dot at each corner. Since I'm doing it in pencil, I'll start on the actual paper. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger of a pattern since it's kind of intricate. And I know I only have the wider Sharpie for coloring in things. Again, you should have the ability to speed up your video and watch it at 1.5 times speed or double. So if you're past this, want to see this pattern, you don't have to watch. I just like to demonstrate a few of the patterns for you guys as we go through this. Okay, so I have that so far, and then it looks like it takes a leaf shape or oblong, almost like the eyeball outer layer shape here. I was supposed to do alternating directions, so let's go back and change that to this way. So, already had a mistake, no big deal. Let's see here. And these are going to be wrong. Okay. So it's supposed to come out from the center like a flower, almost, I think. Yeah. We may get our own version of this too. It may not be exact. And this one was supposed to go that way. Good thing I didn't choose to do this one in ink first. Or it just would have been maybe a new pattern. It doesn't exist yet. Okay, and I'm going to change it because I wanted the dots to be in the center of the flower and not in the negative round space. So I think I'll leave the dots there and not elsewhere. So I'm going to come in, outline back over my design. Again, if you don't want to use the Sharpie and would rather use ink pen, you can. Let's see here. This is the nice part about doing it in pencil first, is you can kind of decide where you're going to put everything. When I do these, I really enjoy using a thin pen, but it takes much longer if you're using a small pen. Just depends on how much time you want to dedicate to it. Since I'm doing it on camera today, I think I'll stick with this thicker Sharpie for now. Show you guys how to work with what you have. So I have that one going this way. I believe this one would have went that way. And if I mess up, who knows? It's my artwork. They don't know what my plan was in my head. They just know what it ends up looking like. And if that's good, then awesome. No need to worry about the little mistake part. Like I need some background music going. Maybe I can figure that out in video editing, but okay. Almost there on this pattern. After I get this pattern done, I'm going to pause the video, work on the other patterns, and then I'll start it back up. Okay. So then I think I'm going to go in and fill in some of this space around these to make it have more of the darkened effect in some of the areas. But that gives you the basic concept. Now what will happen is as I fill in on my patterns, this negative space will end up becoming the positive space. It's kind of like a switcheroo happens. All right, I will come back to you guys when I get it done, okay? All right, so here's my finished Zentangle. I spent a good amount of time on this. I ended up probably close to an hour and a half filling in the rest of the space. Some of it has a few mistakes, but unless I tell you where they're at, you're probably not going to see them. So for me, that's a success. So again, to recap, you're going to come up with something, whether it's a letter, an animal, any sort of shape. If you need to ask me for approval of something, feel free to ask. You're going to come up with something to put in the center of your paper. It's always a good idea if your hand can't cover the whole thing. Then from behind, you're going to fill all of the other space, the negative space, the Zentangles. In turn, what happens is the image is filled with negative space, but it's supposed to be the focal point. And then the negative space becomes so busy that it almost works as a positive space. All right, so that is our Zentangle project for this year. Awesome.